Back on board with a football in focus show from the Kickback Jacks on Battleground Avenue. Joe Sirera with us in the news and record. And look back at the high school games last week. We're going to start with that one we were probably thinking about on the way in, about that Southwest Gopher game last week against Mount Tabor. I guess they had to do that 3 times. The first time the punt gets blocked and the clock was stopped for some reason. And the next time I think the field goal was good or whatever. The field goal was good, and they said it was a penalty. They came back and
they called it, said it was encroachment before the snap. Yeah.
And if Southwest had the ball, if they earlier before they gave it up, they had the ball, they wouldn't have fumbled. They would have went and run the game out anyway, right?
Yeah, they either would have scored or taken it to overtime.
Game, and it sounds like Coach Rainey, he's still not happy about what happened, but he has realized they got to move on because they've got some other games to still play. But boy, that had to be a crazy ending over there.
Yeah, I was not at that game. JP Mundy was there for us, and Spencer Turkin was at the game as a fan. And the field goal attempt that started the whole sequence came on second down. It was blocked, but it never crossed the line of scrimmage. Went behind the line. Mount Tabor recovered, and the Southwest folks' argument, and a pretty legitimate one, is that since they had no timeouts left, the clock should have expired when they recovered. Well, the officials apparently, according to the NCHSAA, ruled that there was so much confusion that the referees stopped the clock to sort out who had possession, and then they basically put 2.6 back on, and that was it. But the Southwest people were not happy, and understandably so. I mean, they thought they should at least get to overtime in that situation.
And I was thinking if it was the fault of the Southwest Guilford clock operator, then man, somebody would have up there and yanked that guy out of the booth. It was not.
They signaled. He was signaled to stop the clock, and he did what the officials told him to do and did his job.
Yeah.
But as the home team, you would think that maybe you'd let a little time go there.
You would think, and you got a referee up in the booth as well. He's right there beside him, right? So he's kind of controlling the activity up there.
Yeah, and he apparently told the clock operator to stop the clock, and he did. But
wow.
It was a tough situation for Southwest, and they've had some very close losses. That obviously the game with Ragsdale where they missed 2 extra points and lost in overtime, 15-12 to Reynolds early in the year. I mean, all tough losses. But the one thing that they do have going for them is that they have that win over Dudley.
It's going to help that strength of schedule, isn't it?
Strength of schedule and tiebreakers, depending on how that conference falls.
And the conference is still kind of, it's definitely up for grabs.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody's game still.
Mount Tabor this week at Parkland, and Parkland gave Dudley a pretty good game last week. They're not great offensive. They alternate or mix in 2 freshman quarterbacks at Parkland, but they're both very athletic. Their defense is really tough. They're home against Mount Tabor. Huge game there. If Mount Tabor loses that game, then things get really wild. If they win, they would still be unbeaten in the conference. Dudley goes there next Friday night, November 3rd. A Dudley win then would create a 3-way tie.
And this year, do they draw for 3-way tie, or they go back to the max rankings?
Now the conference determines its champion. They would do a draw. Each of those 3 teams would be 1-1 in the head-to-head. And Art Wade, the Dudley AD, said that they are going to conduct a draw early next week, Monday or Tuesday, ahead of time, so that they'll know based on Friday's results who finishes where.
So they'll set the scenario up how it could be and go ahead and draw and have it done.
Right, but there's all kinds of permutations. If
I'd like to be a fly in that room, yeah.
If Parkland beats Mount Tabor, then you've got, going into that final Friday night, Dudley, Tabor, and Southwest with 1 loss each, and Mount Tabor and Dudley basically having control there. If Tabor wins, they win the conference because they'd have the tiebreaker on Dudley and on Southwest. If Dudley wins, then you've got that 3-way tie. You have to break it. And if Dudley somehow ties with Southwest by beating Tabor and Tabor losing to Parkland, then it's a 2-way between Dudley and Southwest has the tiebreaker from head-to-head. So, and Dudley could finish 2nd or 3rd, and in some scenarios, if they're in a bad position with the draw, they're almost better off finishing behind Southwest and Mount Tabor, because then they're no worse than 3rd anyway.
It's also the projections with Dudley. From the HSOT by way of the Max Preps and by way, I guess, the association, how they're going to do it. Man, Dudley sometimes as low as number 12 seed.
Yeah, because right now they're still the number 3 in that conference.
Wow.
and 3A and 3AA, because of the way the realignment went, putting more teams in there, and 2A and 2AA are absolutely loaded, and you're going to have to go through a gauntlet, however you do it, to get to those state championship
In
games.
round one with a 4AA, with a 4A, you don't even play that week. They're first round buys several teams, right?
8 teams in each half. In 4A and 4AA, you went from 64 to 48, so 8 teams in each are going to get a bye.
Remember last year, I think we had a bye the first round because of the flood in the eastern part of the state, and decided to put for some teams, they'll be sitting out. Some teams will be playing this year too. Is the way that goes to 4 and 4.
Right, and 2A and 2A, AA, 3A, 3AA, they're playing all the way through.
A lot of big games last week, some big games this week. Got the big game with Grimsley and Page coming up over at
Always
Page
a huge
this year.
game. Yep,
Big
second time
game.
ever at Marion Kirby. Yeah.
What about the thoughts of that going in?
We've got some Grimsley guys here in the house to watch. I think they have a chance. I think they're trending upward, especially coming off of that win over High Point Central. But Page's defense is really tough. I think that's one of the best defenses in the state. We've talked about it. When you got a linebacking core of B.J. Turner, Alex Gray, and Alan Tisdale, I don't think there's going to be many better linebacking cores in the state. They're very aggressive up front. They're blitzing, looping, stunning, throwing all kinds of different looks at you. You've got to be prepared for that. If Grimsley can move the ball against them and get some points, I think they have a shot, but they've got to be underdogs going over there, no question.
And you got to be thinking the Grimsley defense, big challenge to them. They've got to do something to stop that Page offense. Javondre Page last week for Page last Friday night, like 6 touchdown passes, and he's got plenty of receivers to throw the ball to.
Yeah, I think the receivers are really emerging. Cody King had a breakout game with 4 touchdown catches last week. The biggest improvement with their offense, we've talked about it a little bit, is Javondre Page cutting down on the turnovers. He's a sophomore, and he's getting better as the year goes on. Last 2 games, 10 touchdown passes, 2 rushing touchdowns, and has basically eliminated those turnovers. At one point, he had 12 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions, but he's really gotten that under control, and that's going to be a key for them going forward in the playoffs. Their defense is good enough to take them back to a state championship game. It's the offense that has to develop.
If I'm the Grimsley defense, I almost want to camp out or bring a sleeping bag in and spend the night at school just to go as a unit overnight, like an Army unit, to get prepared for that Page offense. I think if the Grimsley defense can do something against the Page offense, they got a chance in that game. But you got to find somebody to slow down that offense.
Yeah.
Because they were chewing High Point Central, like High Point Central. And the fact of the matter was the High Point Central running backs, it was like murderer's row. If you felt bad for the running back when you don't want that kid to get the ball.
Yeah.
You know, if he ran left or ran right, the linebacker is going to be there so quick, and the defensive linemen coming off their blocks, they were killing those High Point Central running backs because they had the backup running back in the game.
Montarius Godfrey, that great freshman, is out. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way Page plays, and we've talked about it. They're going to spend their front 6-7 guys are going to spend most of the night in the opponent's backfield because they do not want to go hat on hat with you. They want to line up in the gaps. They'll adjust. They'll go in a 2-point stance just so that they can get gaps, and they're going to be in your backfield. The key is that you can gash them too. And they're gambling that they're going to make more plays in your backfield than you're going to gash them for big plays. If you get 5 yards downfield against them,
just get
through
that second
line,
level. Those passes the second level, you're ready to go.
As much as they blitz, sometimes there is no second level. If you're in a spread and you run people off, but you've got to get through that first wave. If you do, you've got a chance. But they're really good, and not many people have gotten through that second wave. The only team that scored more than, I think, 19, 20 points against them was Northern Guilford, and that was that fourth quarter where Page played a lot of substitutes, and Jacob Leonard got hot, and they made it interesting, 38-27.
And even a guy like Cam Gavin up front around the nose guard or nose tackle position, he creates a lot of havoc too. Very busy.
He's in the tradition of Tyler DeBerry last year, Elijah Diarra-Suba before him, a little bit undersized, but he's closer to the quarterback than the offensive linemen are right after the snap on most plays. He's through and he's making plays, and you've got to find some way to deal with a guy like that.
And if the Grimsley offensive lineman, you hope you've got 2 or 3 steps forward, and so you hope you're not getting pushed 2 steps back. If you're getting pushed back in your backfield, you're in trouble.
Communication is huge when you're going up against a team like Page that will hit you with a lot of different types of fronts, a lot of blitzing, a lot of stunting. Those guys on the offensive line before that snap have to know what look they're seeing and have to get their calls right on the blocking assignments. If they do, like I said, you can gash them, but they're gambling that they're going to hit you for a lot more negative plays and you're going to hit them with big chunk plays.
A lot of gashes last week. The opposing defense, Eastern Guilford's Dominique Graves, I think had 6 touchdown passes in the first half.
Yep.
He is kind of moving his way up in that elite quarterback status. He's a senior, should be up there. But I'd say he and Javondre Page and a few others are in that position now where Dominique Graves could challenge the top quarterback in the county for this season because he's averaging 100 yards pass, over 100 yards passing game plus 100 yards rushing per game. I think he's in that neighborhood.
Yeah, they were a little banged up early in the season, and when they got Christian McMullen back, that big back in the backfield to complement Darryl Roberts, that made a huge difference for them. If you look at their numbers since he came back, that's kind of when Dominique Graves has taken off because the read option stuff that they do, a lot of that is a lot more effective when you've got a back like McMullen. Not that Darryl Roberts didn't do a good job, but McMullen is better, and that's made a huge difference.
Making people be more honest on defense. Defense got to be more honest. He comes in that way.
Yeah, and they've been able to throw the ball a little bit more because Eastern Guilford is either going to throw quick screens or if they're going to do anything deeper than that, they're going to throw in favorable down and yardage situations. They're going to throw on 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 1, and they get in those situations because of good running plays on the first down with McMullen and Graves.
Good running plays. Malachi Main, I think he had 4 touchdowns first half last week. He's got 1,299 now. He's kind of becoming the elite back in the county. He's got 17 touchdowns, and I wouldn't expect him to do anything less against maybe High Point Central. Then his big challenge would come up as they would take on Page the following week.
Yeah, I mean, if they can beat High Point Central, they're going to be 3-0 and going into that game with Page. And if Page can get past Grimsley, then that would be 2 3-0 teams, and you'd be determining your conference champion. I would like Page's chances in that game a little bit better. But Manus is a guy, the most impressive thing to me about him is that everybody knows what's coming, and he's still getting his yards. You know when you face that team, they've got a pretty good young quarterback, Devin Boykin, the coach's son. They've got 2 good receivers, Travion Pratt and Trey Good, but having that running back and knowing what's coming, and they're still doing it, it's the blocking, and it's Malachi Manus.
Number 5, Malachi Manus getting the job done for Ragsdale. And what about, think about the Grimsley Page game. They got the JV game tonight. That's kind of interesting, too, because Grimsley... 2 very strong JV teams. Grimsley at 7-1, Page 8-0, makes for a good matchup there.
Yeah, and you know, the thing you look at there, as a high school football fan, is that means there's a lot more talent coming in both programs. Grimsley's trending upward. Page isn't going to fall off the map suddenly when they lose all these guys on defense after this year. Very, very bright future for both programs.
And Grimsley, it may take a couple of years to get back closer to Page, but it's definitely coming. With that JV team is 7-1, and Coach Brown, last year I think the JV team might have been 6-4, so improvement every year. They're coming along well. Well,
and those are the kids that have been in that strength and conditioning program that he and his staff are working with for a year or 2 now. And that's when you see the dividends, when those kids get to be juniors and seniors and they've been in weight training classes in school for a few years, and the older guys who've bought in have shown them how to lead and how to take it to the next level. That's how it starts. It doesn't happen overnight.
And you look at the numbers, you were talking about those before the program began tonight here at Kickback Jacks Football and Focus for a Thursday. Big Grimsley Page game tomorrow night. Going back over the years, it looks like Grimsley, we know they won back around 1970, 1987, 1999. They won between like 2004 and 2006, but the wins have been few and far in between over the years.
Yeah, we've got something on our website, hsextra.com right now, and in print tomorrow, kind of looking at by the numbers for the games. And as best we can tell from talking to the historian at Grimsley and some of the folks at Page, the all-time series as we've got it, and those old records can be hard to track down, but it's, as far as we can tell, Page 43 wins, Grimsley, 45 wins, Grimsley 11, and 3 ties over the years. And that includes some playoff games, too. Not lately, but they've had some playoff games. So, yeah, the wins for Grimsley, not very frequent, but that's why you play it every year, because any one of those years, any year, things can change.
Yeah, I came across that video, the win in 1987, Kurt McGuinn in the playoffs. That was a whale of a win that night for Grimsley. I think it might have been back in the Jeff Smouse days, back when Coach Smouse was still
Ethan
there.
Albright, maybe, at tight end, if I'm not mistaken.
Close, right, very close.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to the coaches. Coach Brown's going to develop his persona for this rivalry now, because you had Coach Gillespie, who lost the first game, I think, to Grimsley. Didn't lose anymore after that, back in his time at Page.
Yeah.
But you kind of think of Coach Smouse as being one of the rocks back in the day as far as coaching staff. I know he loved that series, and they built it up pretty well when he was here. And I guess that was back when Marion Kirby was at Page, so made for 2 pretty good marquee coaches back in those days.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the 2 of the better coaches in the city of Greensboro, high school football over the years, no question.
And you look at the quarterbacks; both of them are sophomores.
Yeah,
for the most part.
another reason to think that this rivalry is going to get better and better and better, and that both of these teams, Page is not going to drop off much after this year, if at all, and Grimsley is trending upward. A lot of young talent, some good seniors, a couple guys you got coming in here later today, but the young guys are coming along too, and that's got to be encouraging for that program, and eases maybe a little bit of the frustration they've had at times last year and this year.
And that kid Quan Nora, the running back, has shown some promise too. Get that established running back in the backfield.
And
He's only a
Bourne-Lassane will
sophomore.
be back. He's a junior. I mean, there's a lot of promise there. You mentioned the sophomore quarterback, Christopher Zealous, the younger brother of former Dudley receiver John Zealous. There's a lot of talent there. Darryl Brown said he thinks Christopher Zealous could be the best quarterback he's ever coached if he continues to develop.
He's coached some good ones too.
And he's coached some good ones, and he knows football, so that's impressive.
Seen some good ones come through this show over the years too. A quarterback for Southern back in the day.
Yep.
For Grimsley's standpoint, you don't want to go too crazy from the beginning. You got to go under control. Got to play that game under control. I thought if you could hold Page to less, or right at 28 points or less. I know that seems like a lot to some people, but plus Page is they score in the 50s a lot. Hold them to 28 points or less, a goal going in. Don't go overboard going in, and also make sure your defense from Grimsley's ready going in, because they got to be prepared with the Page offense. You know the Page defense. You don't even think about those guys, but you got to be ready to take on that Page defense.
There was so much hype 2 years ago. I mean, Grimsley was right in that game. They had a couple of early interceptions, and what turned that game big time in Page's favor was a block punt near the end of the first half. That really gave Page the lift that they needed. But those Page kids having it at Marion Kirby Stadium for the first time, they were so overhyped at the start of that game that they were just not, they were playing out of character. I think it's important this time for Grimsley to go in and not get out of character early and just hang in there, not make any big mistakes early, because mistakes have been, turnovers, penalties have been the thing that's hurt that program and that team this year. If they can hang around for a while, like you say, we're going to have a very good football game.
Looking forward to it tomorrow night over at Page, Marion Kirby Stadium. Kickoff 7:30. Page and Grimsley get together. Great football game always. I mean, the atmosphere is excellent.
Yeah, over 7,000 2 years ago. Yeah.
And the weather should be good too, because it's nice. It's good football weather.
It feels
now.
like football. Yeah,
It does. Feel
no
like it's
question.
time to put the ball in the air, you might say, with those two quarterbacks. How about the game between Ragsdale and High Point Central? Ragsdale's on a collision course. If they keep winning, they've gotten to win these games. Central's a bit banged up, like you said, running back.
Yeah.
And man, the quarterback didn't do himself any favors last week. He got beat up a lot too.
Yeah, I think Ragsdale you have to see as a pretty heavy favorite in that game, but it is at High Point Central, so when you go on the road, things can happen. Ragsdale's got a good win over Southwest Guilford. They're playing good football.
They're playing better than I ever
about
dreamed they would. They've got a chance to completely flip this thing around what they did last year. We talked about that some last week. They were 4-7 last year. They could go 7-4 this year, regular season. That would be a great first year under head coach Johnny Boykin. A solid first year.
The kids believe, and that's half the battle.
They got some good battles too, because Devin Boykin's right at 1,000 yards passing. We said already, Manus at like 1,300 yards rushing. That's very good balance there. And I don't mind my rushing being ahead of my passing, because my passing is going to have to catch up, because you get in trouble, you're going to be throwing the ball anyway. So it's going to catch up when you need to.
And weather as the season gets later, whether it's cold weather or rain, affects the passing game a lot more than it affects the running game.
And Manus said his best night of the season, which probably was, put huge numbers in the rain against Western Guilford that night. And that was even a close game. I mean, Western Guilford hadn't won a game, but they played Ragsdale close enough that night. But what Manus said, even on that wet track that night, that was his best night of the year.
Three something in that game. They had a monster game.
What about this game with Northeast Guilford? Is it Northeast Guilford? Is it in McMichael? Is that the key game up at McMichael?
Yeah, it's got significance to both teams for different reasons. For Northeast, after this, they've got, I believe it's Person. They've got, Person, who's not very good. They win this game, they're going into the playoffs at 7-4, and with a lot of momentum, from how this season's gone, with Earl Bates in his first year as coach. McMichael, a little bit different situation. They had a coaching change during the season. Darnell Wiggins left, and over the last 4 games, one of his assistants, Chris Walsh, was promoted as interim coach. They're 2-2 since he took over. So they're I think they're probably playing a little bit for his job. If they can win this one, maybe he's got a shot at keeping that job more than on an interim basis. So they've got to be motivated by that. And Northeast, they can go into the playoffs at 7-4. That's a nice year for them.
It is, and kind of interesting too that teams like McMichael and Rockingham County are now starting to become part of the the equation in that Mid-State 3A before. You looked at Moorhead, you looked at Michael, you looked at Rockingham County. We got to win those 3. We know we're going to win those 3 going in. Those are 3 wins we got to get. But now, maybe not the same story because Rockingham beat Northern and Northeast.
Yeah, Rockingham County is another team that's had a real turnaround this year. They struggled last year and brought in Brad Baker from one of the Mecklenburg County schools. I can't remember which one, but he's former Reedsville assistant off the Jimmy T coaching tree, good friend of Doug Robertson, good friend of Earl Bates. Those guys go way back. There's a lot of Reedsville coaching roots in this area, and he's done a really good job turning that around. And the guy who was the head coach last year, Mike Jebby, stuck around as defensive coordinator. So that gave the kids a lot of continuity, and I think that really has helped that program. But Moorhead is clearly down. A couple of years ago when Earl Bates was here, Moorhead got to the third round of the playoffs.
They beat Havelock when you did,
destroyed Havelock down there. And led Rocky Mount late, and a Rocky Mountain team that won the state championship. But that was maybe a once in a generation team for Moorhead. The Dabbs brothers, they had a heck of a lot of good athletes off of those state championship wrestling teams, and they all graduated. And last year was down, and this year it's been a struggle too.
How about this High Point Christian Statesville Christian game? High Point Christian stepping it up a level because Statesville Christian, for some reason, football and basketball, they got some of the best athletes I've ever read about. These guys are crazy up there.
Yeah, they're a very good team. Scott Bell, the High Point Christian coach, is just raving about how talented and how deep Statesville Christian is. They're unbeaten, and I think they've outscored their opponents like something like 452 to 44 for the season. Some video game numbers for them. But the weird thing with the NCISAA, the private school playoffs, is they don't decide what division you're going to play in until they seed the playoffs. So High Point Christian could end up in Division I, which is their highest level, but it's highly unlikely. More than likely, they'll be in Division II, which they won last year. But Statesville Christian is going to be in the Division I playoffs. A very strong team, much larger student body. And the other team that High Point Christian lost to this year, a very good Charlotte Christian team that either beat or almost beat Charlotte Catholic early in the year. That's their other loss, and High Point Christian had their 2 best linebackers and their quarterback out for that game. They've gotten the 2 linebackers back, Copeland Pettifils and Wistar Allen, but their quarterback, Caleb Hommel, who started out at Northwest, is still having problems with the meniscus in one knee. He's definitely out. They're hoping maybe they get him back for the playoffs. But yeah, that's a huge game. If High Point Christian were to win that game, it actually might not be the best thing in the world because they might put them in Division I. They're kind of better off right now staying in Division II. They can beat those teams, maybe get their 3rd straight state championship.
Statesville Christian's got some highly recruited basketball players too.
Yeah, and some of those kids are on the football team. I mean,
athletes.
And the team they lost earlier, Charlotte Christian, their quarterback's a junior, and he's already got an Alabama offer.
Charlotte Christian. Wow, that's impressive.
A bunch of their assistant coaches are former Panthers players. John Casey's down there. A number of them.
That's interesting. Yeah, those Panther guys are everywhere. Frank Garcia's over at Catholic. You got Hoover over at Cannon.
Yep.
You got the guy you just mentioned over there at Charlotte.
I think they either have 4 or 5 former Panthers assistants on that team.
You used to have a bunch of them.
Keith Metzlars,
the big
tight end is on that team.
The big defensive lineman was on there coaching too, because I remember they came to Smith one year. Wow, they are loaded. You're right about that.
Yep.
How about this? What about this NC State team going to South Bend, Indiana on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 kickoff? Huge game for the Wolfpack. Chance to maybe make something happen.
Yeah, they each week now it's kind of progressing for them. If they beat Pitt, if they can take care of this game somehow, get a win at South Bend, the following Saturday, Clemson comes to Carter Finley, and it's either going to be in the 3:30 time slot or a primetime time slot. If Clemson takes care of Georgia Tech this week and NC State wins, that game would definitely be a night game. The other option for ABC, I guess, is Virginia Tech and Miami, but Clemson, NC State, if both of them are coming in there with just the one loss, that would be maybe the biggest game in the state for one of the Division I programs, maybe since Florida State and North Carolina played with Mack Brown back in the days.
Interesting, too, that State's win over Syracuse seems even bigger now since Syracuse beat Clemson. Plus, the fact, look at NC State, they've got a chance to do something. They're both 6-1 going to Notre Dame. Big chance then to make something happen. Plus, another interesting fact, too. I mean, you don't want to even think about this because you're going to play the game to win it. But if for some wild and unusual, crazy reason State will lose, it is not a conference game. That's one thing to think about.
Right, because of the arrangement that
Notre Dame
Dame
want that
has.
national level,
of course.
They want that national platform.
If they can beat Notre Dame, beat Clemson, somehow win the ACC, you've got to consider them for the playoff because they'd have that one very close loss to South Carolina to open the season that they'd love to have back. But They always say with the playoff stuff, you're better off if you lose early, and that would be an opening game loss and bounce back from there. But yeah, and this is State's year to make a run. They've got so many really talented seniors on that defense, although a younger guy, Jarris Moorhead from Eastern Guilford, will be back. They're going to lose Jalen Samuels, the all-purpose guy on offense after this year. The quarterback, Ryan Finley, has the option to enter the NFL draft, and the NFL people seem to like him, so he might not be back. So this is their year to make this run, and they're getting Clemson at home. That's huge.
Do the Panthers get it back together against Tampa Bay this weekend? Because last week against the Bears, the offense completely just laid an egg.
Yeah.
The defense only gave up 3 points. It should have been a 3-3 game. All the offense from the Bears came from the Panthers offense. They gave it to them.
Yeah, I mean, what did Mitch Trubisky complete? Like 4 passes in the game, something like that. The Panthers are struggling. I think some of it because of injuries, and some of it is there've been a lot of distractions. When you look at the latest Cam Newton thing this week,
I mean, Wednesday,
it's just the last time they bounced back really well from it. Maybe they will again, but there's something that's just not quite right with the chemistry on that team. And
I tell you what, you look at McCaffrey. If he's your running back, I think he should be a slot back. They've got to redevelop that running back spot. I think he's too small to be a major. He's going to take too much of a beating. I see McCaffrey running inside against this big defense. I think, man, this kid's got to get outside. I got to shoot him at pass. And he's the best one-headed pass grabber I've seen in a while. Get him outside, grab those. Man, this is.
Jonathan Stewart, definitely a better inside guy. I think they try to use McCaffrey, A, to give Stewart a break as a running back, and B, as a change of pace. And if whenever Stewart's in the game, you run inside, and whenever McCaffrey's in, you run outside, you become really predictable. Because all the NFL is about is
we've got to get better linemen.
Is analytics and predictability, right. And everybody scouts the heck out of everybody.
Mike Shula's job is a lot tougher this year, isn't it? A lot tougher this year.
Yeah, you're down a very good tight end in Greg Olsen, and you look at their defense, and as good as it's been at times, although they got torched against the Saints. You're playing with that Luke Kuechly. Maybe,
and
if not the best linebacker in the league, one of the best. Yeah, apparently he's practicing a little bit. He needs to be careful, and they need to be careful with all the concussions that he's had. You'd hate to see him have long-term issues. But
I want to develop a game plan for him where he doesn't play every down, every game on defense. Limited him a little bit. Yeah. How about our distant replay? Last week had a great one with the Oakland Raiders going to win that game.
That was a heck of a game.
That was like everything. 4 tries.
That was everything we thought it was going to be. Crazy. Very exciting. It's some offense. It was
the best game CBS
AFL.
could ever have. I mean, CBS had to love that game they had last week. This week, we got the Dolphins against the Ravens, and the Dolphins are the distant replay team. Looking at the Dolphins around 1972, looking back at that those
unbeaten
guys.
Season.
I give you the name on offense. I love that name, Larry Zonka, number 39. Heard some announcers a few
out of
weeks
Syracuse,
back. Some young guys that were announcing the game on national television. They brought up, remember that number 39? When the young guys know this guy, he was unreal back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Well, and at one point, the year that they lost, the previous year in the Super Bowl to Dallas, it was Larry Zonka and Jim Kick, and they were the first duo where they each went over 1,000 yards.
That's right.
And they referred to them as Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid back in the day. That year, Kick was the starter, but the guy who really took them to the next level was Mercury Morris.
Eugene Mercury Morris.
Yes. Having him as the lightning to Zonka's thunder made a big difference, because Kick was a very good receiver out of the backfield, but he wasn't the fastest guy in the world, and he and Zonka were a lot alike. He became more of a third down back as they evolved. But that Dolphins team, when I was following football, that was my team from about 68 to about 75. So I could drop names on you.
My favorite defensive guy that was Nick Bonacani. Heck of a name.
Yeah, linebacker from Notre Dame.
Notre Dame played lineman in college, and they made him a linebacker in the pros.
Yeah, started out with the old Boston Patriots, and the Dolphins got him in the trade. Yeah.
Some other names I'm sure you remember. We mentioned Eugene Mercury Morris. You had guys like Manny Fernandez on defense.
He was such a big part of that 3-4 defense that they ran. He was the nose tackle, small, undersized, but incredibly quick. But if you look back at the heights and weights of the guys in that era, it's amazing how light those guys were compared to what you're seeing today. Your defensive lineman Fernandez was like 225 or 230.
If you saw a 300-pounder back then, you'd say you're cut. You can't make. You're overweight.
Right. You're overweight. Yeah, the game has changed so much as the population in general has just gotten bigger and stronger.
You mentioned Jim Kick, Mercury Morris, mentioned the quarterback Bob Greasy. What about Earl Morrill? Earl comes in. He was with Shula in Baltimore, did a great job there. They comes down to Miami and leads them to victories down there too. Yeah,
Greasy got hurt early in that perfect season. I think it was against the Chargers, but I can't remember what game it was. And Morrill led them into the playoffs, and then I think it was the first round of the playoffs where they beat Cleveland. in the AFC playoffs. Greasy came back, and then they beat the Steelers right before the Steelers went on their run, and then beat the Redskins in that Super Bowl 14-7.
That was Zagari Premium.
Yes.
We talked about him last
Yeah.
week when he tried that field goal, and I think it was Mike Bass picked it up, maybe took it back.
Yep, that was
Wow,
the
what a
only
game.
touchdown for Washington.
Some other key names off this Dolphin team: Paul Warfield, wide receiver.
Yeah, one of the
Back when the
greats.
wide receiver spot wasn't utilized as much as it definitely is today, but boy, a heck of a receiver back in the day.
Yeah, and the Dolphins, the game in those days was running and ball control, and the Dolphins, nobody was better at it at that time. But Warfield was the guy when they sucked 7, 8, 9, 10 guys up into the box. He could beat anybody one-on-one, and they'd look for those opportunities. They might throw to him 4 or 5 times a game, but he'd still end up with over 100 yards receiving because every one of those catches would be a big play.
And some big linemen like Bob Kuchenberg. You had guys like
Larry Little,
he was
Hall of
unreal.
Famer. I don't know if he was the center that year, but he came along right after that. Jim Langer, who was in the Hall of Fame.
You had guys as well up that way, like Bob Matheson on the team.
He was the guy that 53 defense, which was what they ran.
And they
He
called
was
him
the
a no-name
53
defense back then, of all things. A no-name defense, and you had guys like Nick Monicani, and you had Matheson, you had, we mentioned Manny Fernandez, they had Jake Scott, they had Dick Anderson, all those crazy
Bill
names.
Stanfield was a really good defensive end out of Georgia on those teams. Scott, I think, was a Georgia guy too, Jake Scott, but he was a big interceptions guy, playing free safety, ball hawk back there. That was just a really, really good football
And
team.
had a punter named Larry Seipel. Larry was also, he had to work hard. He was also a backup wide receiver on that crazy team.
And that perfect season, he ran a fake punt against the Steelers that helped beat them in the AFC Championship game because he was a good athlete. He was a receiver, and it wasn't just he took the ball and took off on the snap. He went through the leg motion of kicking it, and the Steelers turned and he took off upfield. He hadn't kicked the ball. You don't see that kind of a fake anymore, Nate, because there's so much pressure brought, and the special teams schemes are so sophisticated now.
Punt now. I mean,
that swinging gate,
And the way the punting team lines up, I mean, they didn't do this back in the day, but this day and time, they'll have like 3 guys
that
in front of the
swinging
punter,
gate, and one of them will close up after the
and the long
snap.
snapper, I guess that's why he's making $600,000 a year. A guy like Ethan Hawke, he's got to snap it through those bodies too.
Yeah.
You see, he didn't have anybody, he just snapped it clear to the punter back in the day. Now he's got to snap it through like a little line of people.
Yeah, and then that guy who vacates the spot to let him snap then steps up, and they've got a 3-man protection wall there.
But those Dolphins, 1972, the only undefeated team, I guess, in modern day professional football history.
Won the Super Bowl the next year too, beat Minnesota, beat the Vikings.
And they all get together every year when a team's getting close to going undefeated. They have like that party, and they all sit there and smile at the end.
Oh yeah, they've got that champagne that they've not cracked open yet when someone finally does it. And New England came close a few years ago, but the Giants ruined that.
What about last night's baseball game? That was a classic.
Didn't have to say I didn't get to see it, unfortunately. I was watching the Charlotte Hornets.
Oh, and they won, didn't they?
Yes.
And Big Man got about 20 rebounds. He had 19 rebounds last night. Dwight Howard got the boards again.
He's gotten stronger as it's gone on. I think he's getting comfortable with that team.
I'm happy with his rebounds.
Steve Clifford coached him at Orlando
sure did,
and knows how to get a lot out of him, and they have a trust relationship that at this stage of Dwight Howard's career, that's the kind of guy he needs coaching.
And it was funny, kind of crazy last night's game. You had Cameron Maben out of Asheville, just whizzed a base hit right past, I think, the shortstop Corey Seager from Concord, who trains over at Allen Ashkenazi's batting center in the offseason. But just a crazy game. And you had the man on the mound for Houston throws a ball down towards second base, trying to keep toward close to the bag. Not even near the bag, and he goes toward the outfield, hits the umpire in the leg, got a dead ball there, protects the runner from stealing a base. You don't hardly ever see the ball.
Yeah.
You might see a batted ball hit an umpire, but a thrown ball hit an umpire, highly unusual.
Once in a while, you'll see a ball that's either a wild pitch or a pass ball where it'll hit the ump and kind of keep the runner from advancing that way. But in the field, very, very rare on a thrown ball, as you say, because usually they have the time to see it coming and get out of the way, whereas a ball that's hit, sometimes these guys hit the ball so hard. There was a play in one of the games in the Yankees series with Cleveland where Cleveland's third baseman's a very good defensive player, and the ball was hit at him so hard that he couldn't get his glove down and it hit off his leg. You don't see that very often, but guys throwing harder, bigger and stronger guys hitting the ball. They talk about that exit speed, the ball coming off the bat. It's unreal.
Yeah. And they had home run score last night, too. Back-to-back homers in the game and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, from Houston's standpoint, they were pretty much dead, and they came back to life and able to pull off a win in Los Angeles. That was big.
Yeah, that looks like it's going to be a really good series. I'm obviously going to try to catch some of those games. But last night, like I said, I got hooked on the Hornets early and stuck with them.
How'd Kimball Walker do? Had another good game?
He played reasonably well. They got a lot more out of some of their younger guys. The rookie Malik Monk had a good game.
looking for him to do something to help that
He
team.
started
He needs
hitting
help.
some shots last night.
Yeah.
His shot hasn't quite been there. Dwayne Bacon, their second round
He's
pick,
starting some,
has
hasn't
been a pleasant surprise and a very good rebounder for a guard. You know, they're 2-2. They haven't had Cody Zeller since the opener. He's been hurt. They're hoping to get him back soon. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist came back from an injury, but he's not 100%.
When's Nick Batum back? When's he come back? About
He
5
has
weeks, 6 weeks?
He has a partially torn they diagnosed ulnar collateral ligament, and if it had been completely torn, they would have had to do Tommy John surgery on a basketball player. So basketball players don't get that injury very often, so they don't know when he's going to be back. They said 6 to 8 weeks when he got hurt, but it's new territory. He fell awkwardly on it. The elbow kind of bent, and like I said, you see that a lot of times on pitchers. You don't see it on basketball
I guess
players.
he's kind of taken the Marcus Kidd-Gilchrist cap. You know, he always wears that cap because he gets injured every year.
Yep.
Now you've got Nick Batum
And
getting injured.
Zeller missed 20 games last year, and that cost them a playoff spot. They were 3-17 in the 20 games he missed, and they didn't miss the playoffs by much. He's not an all-star, but he fits what they do. He's a great pick and roll guy. He does a lot of the little things, a lot of the screening, a lot of the defensive switching and calling things, and you miss a guy like that.
Final question tonight for Joe Sear from the News and Record. Final question. We'll go to our Grimsley guys next. You see all these teams have these ways they can beat you, they can tear you apart. If you had to choose between your poison, between the guillotine or burned at the stake, which one would you take?
Guillotine's quicker.
Yeah,
Burn
I
at the
thought the
stake's
same
going to
thing.
take a while.
That was my first impression.
I would prefer to just call in sick that
Yeah.
day and not have either one.
But you think about it, gosh.
It's not instant. They say it's not instantaneous, but it looks a lot quicker than burning at the stake. Not that either one is a really great option.
Tell you what, it's tough, but it's good. Joe, thank you much.
Andy,
Good
thank
work
you.
as
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Donald.